Goldberry Artisans podcast. This is a podcast all about knitting and about learning from your mistakes and being okay with making mistakes in general. My name is Emily. I'm coming to you from the beautiful state of Maine, and you can find show notes for everything I mention at goldberryartisans.com. And I just wanted to say thank you so much and welcome to my podcast for both new and returning viewers. It's so much fun to connect with other crafters, so yeah, feel free to leave a comment, and I'd love to chat with you both on YouTube and on Instagram. It has been, I believe, at least 3 weeks since I last recorded and uploaded a podcast. Life has just gotten really busy the past couple weeks. I was gone serving at summer camp for a week, and then spending a week, recovering from that and unpacking. And then this past week, my church was running a day camp. So I would go to work and then come and help out with that, and then be busy with activities related to it later in the afternoon. So some knitting has been done, just not me talking about it. And it's amazing how the longer I go between episodes, it's that much harder to get back into it. Like, my knitting stuff is everywhere, and I've got projects that I finish, and I have one project that is completed, but not blocked, because I kept thinking, oh, maybe today I'll record an episode, and I don't want it to be, blocking when I'm recording. So, it's been done for, a week. But, yeah, anyway, enough about all of that. Let's get on to the knitting. Today I'm going to be talking about the projects that I have off the needles, on the needles, as well as an update on my 2017 knitting goals. Oh, I remembered what I was going to say earlier. I've been podcasting for over a year. It was actually beginning of July. Last year was when I first uploaded a podcast episode. So yeah, that was exciting. It seems like it hasn't been that long, but it's August already, which is crazy. So yeah, when I have a tendency to talk quickly, so I gotta remind myself sometimes to slow down. So yeah, we'll dive right into the knitting. The first project, these have been off my needles for a couple of weeks. I am calling these my White Splendor of Moonshine socks. The pattern is the Kanoko socks by Mary Jane Mucklestone, and it's from the 3rd issue of the Making magazine, which, if you've watched many of my podcasts, you'll know I love all 3 issues of that magazine. And the yarn, this blue is Quince & Co. Finch in the Delft colorway, and the white is just some leftover Knit Picks Stroll. So the Finch is a 100% wool yarn, and Stroll is a 75% merino, or superwash, either superwash merino or superwash wool, and then 25% nylon. So yeah, I really loved working on these socks. It feels like it's been forever since I've worked on them. It's super easy pattern, extremely easy color work. If you've been intimidated by color work but you like to make socks, this is definitely a good pattern. And it's written in the pattern to go up a needle size for the color work, just to make sure that since they are socks, they won't be too tight, because the color work is only on the cuff and not on the foot. So yeah, lots of little details like that make this a really great pattern to work on. I love them. I haven't worn them really. I mean, it's July, not really hand knit sock weather. If I made these again, which I would do, no guarantees, but I liked it enough, I would do it again. I would make the ribbing longer. It's just over 1 inch of ribbing, and because it is actually a size 3 needle is called for right here, so that's what I used, and a size 2 needle on the foot. And usually when I knit socks, I use a size 1 needle. So I'd almost be afraid that these would have a tendency to slouch. So that would be my one thing, is that if I knit these again, I would do a little bit longer ribbing. And I honestly don't remember the cast on that I used for this, but it's very stretchy. I'll put it on the screen, I'll look it up. So yeah, very simple, easy sock pattern with some cute color work. And I did not measure, I didn't weigh how much yarn, how much of the blue yarn I had left, but I did have a fairly decent amount left. Like I used over one skein, probably used about a skein and a half. One skein of Finch has 220 yards, so I probably used like 340, maybe somewhere around there. So, and it makes a good sized pair of socks. So yeah, that is all. Oh, and the quote for the name, The White Splendor of Moonshine, comes from the book The Blue Castle by Lucy Maud Montgomery. So, and I don't read the quotes and everything. I don't always talk about where I get the names for my projects, but if you're ever interested, you can head over to my Ravelry project pages. I'm Emily Ruth B on Ravelry, or I have links to my Ravelry projects in my show notes if you are interested in that. So the other project that I have on the needles is one that I had on my needles when I was podcasting, when I was first starting to podcast last summer. Hi! So this project I had, it's the Waiting for Rain shawl by Sylvia McFadden, and she includes like options for how you can, like tips for rearranging the lace panels in the pattern and adding stripes. And so I had done some really funky things and didn't like how it was working, and I knew I was not going to have enough yarn. So I frogged it, bought another skein of yarn, and recast on, and now it is completed. Oh, I can't even fit it all. Start at this end. So as I said, this is the project I was talking about. I haven't blocked it yet, and it definitely could use a block, a good blocking. For the stripes, I looked at some of the other projects that were up on Ravelry to take some inspiration for how I wanted to do the stripes. What I ended up doing, I always wanted them to be symmetrical around the lace panels, which I hadn't done last time, and that's part of why I did not like it. So you'll notice 2 rows of the light gray above, 2 beneath, and then 3 rows above, 3 rows beneath, just to help it be nice and symmetrical. Excuse me. Oh, the yarn. This is Quince & Co. Finch. This dark gray is the colorway Storm, and the light gray is the colorway Frost. 3 of the projects I'm going to talk about, 3 out of my 5, I'm using Quince & Co. Kind of like it. So yeah, and for whatever reason last time I found the lace panels really hard to work on. I just couldn't focus, didn't understand. But this time I used stitch markers as was suggested, as Sylvia suggested in the pattern, and it worked out way better, and I was able to just super easily keep track of where I was in the lace sections. So basically you cast on the shawl and you do increases, and then these are short row sections, so they help make the shawl a little bit deeper. But then I was originally planning on doing the bind off in dark gray. She either says to bind off loosely or do this picot bind off. And I never know what to do when it says bind off loosely. I did not want to use any surprisingly stretchy bind off because this wasn't something that I needed to be able to pull on over my leg or anything like for a sock, but I didn't want it to be pulling in. So I decided, and plus I like the look of this bind off when I looked at some of the other projects. So let me see, this is the side that it starts on. So I started it, I weighed how much of the dark gray and how much of the light gray I had, and I started the bind off with the dark gray. I got but this far and realized I was most definitely not going to have enough of the dark gray. So I switched to the light gray, was a little worried, and I ended up with some finagling with this much yarn left at the end. That's like not even 2 inches. So for these last peacoats, like for these ones, you use a double yarn over. It's how you create the hole. But for this last little bit, I ripped back a little when I realized I was not going to have enough yarn, and I just did like a single yarn over and did some knit 3 togethers instead of knit 2 togethers just to help it move a little faster. And it worked. I ended up with a very tiny amount of yarn left, but I did it. So I'd most definitely, if I just tried to finish it last year, I most certainly would not have had enough yarn. Because I started out this project with 2 skeins of Storm and 2 of Frost, and I bought an extra skein of the Storm colorway. And you can see where I changed colors, or where I changed to the other skein. But it's funny, I feel like it looks, the first row it's obvious. Oh no, it's obvious the whole time, okay. They were not the same dye lot. I was not able to get yarn that was the same dye lot. But I figured the stripes, it wouldn't be super noticeable. So if you can tell, the first 2 skeins are the same dye lot. That first skein ends here, and then I cast on, and then I started with the new skein here. It's not as obvious when the stripes are in the middle, but if you look at them like right there, this one seems to have more blue in it. This one is more, almost to me, seems more like a true gray. It's a warmer gray. This is slightly cooler. So yes, there is a difference. I don't remember what the dye lots were. I think this one might have been like dye lot number 3 and this was like 5. I don't even know. They were a couple dye lots separate. So yeah, you can tell that it's different. But I think when you're just looking at it from far away, I mean, now that I've pointed it out, it's glaringly obvious. But from farther away, it's a little harder to tell. So here, I'll go ahead, I'll try it on. I typically wear shawls, like, trying to figure out how to do this without getting all the ends all over the place. Like this. So I'd adjust it a little more, there we go. I just wear them, I often wear them wrapped up like a scarf, just for ease, then I don't have to fiddle with it. So this will definitely be nice and warm and squishy. Oh my goodness, the garter stitch is so squishy. It's beautiful. But for this one, because I love the lace panels, I may have some times where I just drape it around and just curl up in it because I just love it. So yeah, I'm definitely super, super happy with this project. And every time I use Quince & Co. yarns, I fall more in love with them, which is always good. So that is my, I'm calling this my Dust and Ashes shawl after the song from the Broadway musical called The Great Comet. I now have Dust and Ashes stuck in my head, and I just want to sing it, but I won't. I'll hold it in. Okay, so the next 2 projects are things that I have not talked about at all in the podcast. I've cast them on since I last recorded. This one, I haven't made it very far. These are my summer Twilight socks, as I'm calling them. The pattern is the Rose City Rollers by Mara Catherine Briner. It's a free pattern on Ravelry. Lots and lots of people have made these and talk about them. The yarn is West Yorkshire Spinners in their signature 4-ply. This is the wood picking colorway. But I'm calling these my summer Twilight socks because they remind me of how on those gorgeous summer evenings the sun is almost completely down, but there's still gorgeous blues and purples in the sky with some white puffy clouds. So the pattern is super simple. You basically do some stockinette rows, no ribbing, do some rows of stockinette, so you get a cute little rolled cuff, a drop heel, and then just a standard sock foot. And I haven't made tons of progress on this because I've been working a lot on my other project because it's been fairly mindless. But yeah, I have made some progress. I had made a pair of vanilla socks, the first honest to goodness pair of vanilla socks I'd ever made last year, and I'd used this yarn, and I still had, I think it was like 49 grams, I don't remember, somewhere between 45 and 50 grams left of this yarn, which is about half the skein, but I didn't want to risk doing another full pair of socks, because the ones I'd made had only had like 4-inch cuffs or something like that. They weren't huge. So I wanted something that was going to use up a lot of this yarn. I didn't want it to use up just a little bit in some sort of, as an accent color or anything. So yeah, I decided to make a second pair of socks. This is I've used West Yorkshire spinners. I think this is the third pair of socks that I've made with their yarn, and I have another skein of yarn that I want to use. I love the yarn. I think it's nice and durable. It's definitely not super silky soft. It has a rustic feel, a little bit of a rougher texture, but I personally can wear that and be fine, and I like that, especially in a sock. I don't always necessarily want silky soft, because those, I just feel like they're going to wear out sooner. I haven't worn hand knit socks enough to know from experience, but just common sense. Ooh, there's a bird in, scared me, there's a bird in the trees behind me. I heard noises. Thought it was an animal, like a big animal. Ooh. But I like seeing how the stripes work up. I don't want to necessarily do anything with a fancy stitch pattern, because then you'll lose both the stitch pattern and the stripes. But at the same time, I don't always enjoy just knitting plain vanilla socks. So that's why I've had a full skein of West Yorkshire spinners for like a year, and have not used it, just because I like to space out my vanilla projects. So anyway, yeah, this is my first of my summer Twilight socks. And I think these would definitely be good gifts if you're a sock knitter, but don't want to have the time or yarn to knit full socks. If you know people with small feet, just divide a skein in half and make 2 pairs of socks. Alright, I guess I have 2 more projects on the needles. I'll talk about this one first. You have seen this one before. Ugh. This is my To Waken Up the Flowers sweater. Back that up. It is the Stonecutter pattern by Michelle Wong. This is the front. I've already done the sleeves and the back, but I've been trying to work on this because I want to be able to wear it this fall. I don't want to be working on it through the fall. I want to wear it once cool weather hits. And we had a cooler week this past week, so I would pull this out during the late afternoons and evenings to work on it. The yarn is Quince & Co. Lark in the Storm colorway. Apparently I have a thing for this colorway. And I'm almost at the point where I'm going to start armhole shaping. I need to compare it to the back to see what row of the pattern of the stitch pattern that I started the armhole shaping on. That's what I love about pattern sweaters, is that it's way easier to compare like the front and the back, because for this pattern you work the front like a lot of sweaters knit in pieces. You knit the front and the back very similarly until you have to start shaping for the neckline on the front. So it's way easier to compare the two when there's a stitch pattern to go by, rather than counting rows or just measuring, which is, in my experience, is very inaccurate, and I always have things one side that's longer than the other. So, and I'm always happy, like I was on the back too, when I can get to the point where on the bottom this chart is spread over 2 pages, which makes it that much harder to work with. But then once you get to up here, it starts being like these 2 cables are worked from the same chart, and it's a super like most basic cable ever. And then this is a very simple standard cable, so I don't even need the charts for these ones. It's just the center panel that I need to look at the chart for. But that's a small section, and that's typically only like once every 4 rows you're actually doing some cabling on the front. So yeah, it's becoming much easier to work on this. So yeah, it's coming. It's coming. I love working on it. It's definitely not a travel project, which a lot of my knitting over the past month has been when I've been out and about working on things. Yeah, so I have one more project that I have been loving working on this all the time. I've been awful at updating Instagram lately, so you haven't seen this a lot if you follow me on there. But I've been working on it a lot. This pattern is not yet released. It's Gray Skies. It's the Gray Skies shawl by Naomi Grace, who is Sew Knit C on Instagram. This pattern will be released on August 15th, so really soon. But it is a gorgeous pattern. So easy to work on. I mean, it's a simple eyelet section. The only thing that actually takes some concentration are these couple of rows in here. Like these little bumps. But other than that, everything is so easy. And the pattern is super simple to read. It's laid out in a really nice chart where it'll have like a section, it'll say your row number or row numbers, and then the directions for that row, and then the stitch count you'll have at the end of that row. And they're all nicely divided into columns, so it's super easy. There have been a few times where I can't remember, oh wait, how many rows of this am I supposed to do? But if I just look at the stitch count and count my stitches, then I can easily find how many stitches I need at any point, which has been helpful to me a few times, just to make sure I'm on track or I did the right number of rows. So I'm just barely started. There's like a lace section done in the main color to end the shawl. And I'm working, there's two sizes. There's a small and a large. For the small size, the pattern calls for about 438 yards each of like a solid color and then a variegated yarn, and the large size calls for 490 yards each. I thought about making the large size, but I wasn't sure I would have enough yarn. So I was trying to decide, I was debating for a while what yarn I was going to use for my variegated. I had some hand-dyed yarn, a couple skeins from Once Upon a Corgi. She had a moving sale a couple months ago, so I got a couple skeins. I had some others that I was debating on, but they had like exactly 438 yards, and so I just wasn't totally sure. But then I pulled out a skein of hand spun that had been so amazingly gifted to me. Look at how gorgeous this is. And I mean, you saw what it knits up like, right? I mean, it's beautiful. I don't know anything about spinning, but it's just done so beautifully. And I like how there's some sections, like right here, where it's a 2-ply. So the 2 plies are the same color, but then there's other sections like this where there's like the green and the purple plied together, or the green and this golden yellow color. It's just so stunning. And this is actually the first time I've knit anything with stellina, and it definitely gives the project just that little sparkle. Like anytime people have seen me working on this, they always commented on that. And so this was hand spun, not mine. It was given to me. But the fiber is from Greenwood Fiber Works. It's 4 ounces of a hand-painted glitter roving. It's in the Rivendell colorway, as in where the elves lived in the Lord of the Rings, which totally is what these colors are. It's so spot on. So it is a superwash merino stellina blend. I haven't actually gone to this website, but I don't know if they have anything. greenwoodfiberworks.com. So it's hand spun. I don't know the yardage. And actually the one thing about the pattern is that it does not list, it lists the amount of yards you need, but it doesn't list any weight for the yarn. But I just guessed that 438 yards is a typical fingering weight yardage. Because normally a 100-gram skein will get you somewhere between 400 and 438 yards of yarn for every 100 grams of fingering weight yarn. And the brown yarn that I'm using, the brown yarn is Knit Picks Gloss Fingering. It's 70% merino, 30% silk, and each skein is 220 yards. So I bought 2 skeins of this, and I honestly, I don't know, I have all the right stitch counts and everything, and I'm still in the first skein. And I still have quite a bit of this hand spun left. But anyway, so I bought 2 skeins of this. And then, which means it's 50 gram skeins. So I got 100 grams, got me 440 yards. I weighed this and I had 115 grams, so I figured that would be plenty of yarn, and I was right. Figured that would be plenty of yarn because that meant I had at least 400 yards and definitely had more than that. So, and I honestly was trying to decide if I wanted to pair this yarn with a brown or a gray or a black, because I was basically debating between a couple of skeins of hand dyed and then this hand spun, and then once I decided on this, trying to figure out what yarn would go with it. So I'd never tried this yarn from Knit Picks. I've used a few of their other yarns, but I figured this, since I didn't have to buy a lot, it would just be a nice soft yarn to work with. And it is soft. It's not like, I was about to say it's not silky soft. It has silk in it, but it honestly doesn't feel quite as soft as like the Knit Picks Stroll, which is a superwash wool and nylon blend, but it's definitely has a nice shine to it, and it is soft. Don't get me wrong, it is soft. It's just not, it's not superwash merino slick, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But it is nice and soft. I like working with it a lot. So, and since it's a shawl, I figured it was okay if the yarn wasn't going to be super duper hard wearing, because it's a shawl. It's not something I'm going to be having on my feet or like a sweater or something. So with shawls, I feel a little bit more like I can indulge in some less hardy yarns. Yeah, I'm just so in love with how the hand spun is working up. It's just so beautiful. Put it in front of the green so you can see it better. Yeah, there it is. I just love it. So yes, it's a Facebook group that I'm part of. Naomi put out a call just asking if there were like any podcasters who wanted to, she didn't need test knitters, but just, you know, get the word out about the shawl, just talk about it a little bit, show it off, which I am more than happy to do. As soon as I saw the pictures, I was sold. And this is actually the first time I've ever knit an asymmetrical shawl, which is one reason why I really wanted to work on it. I've never knit a shawl this shape before. And I thought it would be a really good chance to use some hand spun or hand dyed yarns, because sometimes like every once in a while, I'll buy a skein like of Once Upon a Corgi yarn. I love her colorways. But paying $25 to $30 for just one skein of yarn is a lot. Like, that's my yarn for the month, basically. So I only buy one skein, but then there's only so much you can do with one skein of fingering weight yarn. And because I don't buy a lot of hand-dyed yarns, I don't necessarily want to make socks. If I find a super spectacular sock pattern, then maybe. But I want to wear that yarn somewhere where I can really show it off, like a shawl. But you can only make shawls so big when you have like between 400 and 440 yards of yarn. So that's one thing that I really liked about this shawl, is that you can show off a gorgeous hand spun or hand dyed skein and still have enough to make a good sized shawl. But I'm honestly thinking I have so much of the yarn left. I'm thinking now I may go back in, rip back the couple rows of lace that I've done, and put in another eyelet section, like, and just go with a large size. Just because the small and the large sizes are basically the same up until you get to this point. The large size has another eyelet repeat before the lace border, and the small just goes right into the lace border. Because I have so much of this left. Like, it's not even that squishy. There's a lot of yarn left here. So I may go back in leaf or something in my mouth. Gross. So I may go back in, rip those couple of rows back, and make the large size, because I definitely think I will have enough yarn. So yeah, I will, and I'll let you know. I'll definitely let you know when the pattern is released, because it is just gorgeous. And again, perfect for all those special skeins of yarn that you want to use. Because that's my, like, I feel like I don't want to knit a hat out of that fingering weight yarn, you know, especially the skein of fingering, because then you're not using it all. And you'll just have a little bit left, not enough to make something else. But I love projects like this that really, you can highlight the yarn without just being stockinette stitch. That's my other thing, is that with these gorgeous yarns, I like to see them in a stitch that you can really appreciate how beautiful they are. And for me personally, I'm not a big fan. Ever since I started knitting, I did not like doing garter stitch in variegated yarns. Something about just, you can see it a little bit, like just there, where that color overlaps and the rows, it just, I feel like I'm crazy because nobody else seems to have an issue with this, but just that, you know, that, like that little piece right there where you can just see where the yarn peeks through from the other rows, that has just always driven me nuts. I can do it in some projects, but it's always bugged me. I see other people's projects like that and they're beautiful. I do it and I don't like it. So that leaves me with mostly stockinette patterns for hand-dyed or special yarns, but that doesn't always work, especially in a shawl. It's curling. So yeah. And I love working with hand spun. I've worked with hand spun. I've only worked with it a few times. But I love it because there's some sections that are a little thicker, some that are a little thinner. It just feels, I don't know. It just feels so good. Maybe someday I will create my own hand spun and love it even more. I wish. Life goals. Speaking of goals and spinning, that was one of my 2017 knitting goals. I was talking to Sarah of the Dabbling Shepherdess podcast a little while ago, and we were talking about how we had both set 2017 knitting goals, and she was saying she was going to have to go back and revisit hers. And that reminded me, oh yeah, I have those. I hung them up on my wall by my desk so I'd see them. Should probably look at those, see how I'm doing. So I had 6 goals that I started out with in the beginning of the year, just some knitting related goals. I do better with specific goals than just vague, oh, knit more for other people. No, I need numbers. So my first goal was to knit the stonecutter sweater, which is in progress, on track to have that done by the end of the year. My second was to knit 500 grams of yarn from my stash before I bought new yarn. I gave that up almost immediately. I couldn't come up with a good system for tracking how much yarn from my stash I had knit and weighing it. It just wasn't feasible. Not something, if I had exerted myself a lot, I could have done it, but it just wasn't worth it to me. So I revised that recently to be knitting 3 projects from stash yarn before I bought any yarn. So I think I've been doing pretty well from that. All 3, my socks, my Dust and Ashes shawl, and my summer Twilight socks are all from stash. My To Waken Up the Flowers sweaters from stash. So because I realized my stash was getting big, and I had specific plans attached to some of this yarn. I just wasn't using it because I would get distracted by new yarn and line that up in my Ravelry queue to knit this project with this yarn, but then the yarns would sit there because then I bought new yarn while I was in the middle of a big project. So, and I've been trying to do better. Even when I'm tempted to go on and buy yarn, I'll put it in my cart and then wait. And if I actually remember that I wanted that yarn a day or 2 later, then maybe I'll go back and buy it. But if I forget about it, then I just wanted the thrill of looking at yarn and picking it out, not necessarily actually buying it to use it. And even like this, my Gray Skies shawl, which I still haven't named, like this this was stash yarn, and this was yarn that I bought specifically for this project, so I feel good about that because I was buying it for a purpose and I used it. But speaking of stash, I really liked, I don't remember what episode it was, but Liesel of Buckaloo View, she has buckalooView.com. She has a shop where she sells hand-dyed yarns and hand-sewn clothes, and she also has a podcast. I don't remember what episode it was, but she was talking about stash and about how it seems like right now a lot of people are talking about stashing yarn as a bad thing, but about how it is nice sometimes to have that small stash, so then you know if you want a quick gift for somebody or to cast on a pair of socks, to have a good traveling project, it's nice to have some yarn around, so that I have yarn for those things when I really want it or when I need it. And I know some people don't work like that. Some people buy, use it, and then buy more. But I like to have yarn, and I feel inspired just looking through it and thinking of what I can make with it. I think my problem is just that I need to look at it more. Because one of my next goal was to really organize it. It was on a shelf, but just crammed on the shelf, and so it was hard. I would pull one skein out and a whole bunch would fall off. So I did organize it. I bought some baskets to put it in, fit on the shelf, but it's harder to see is my problem. But it needs to be in those, otherwise the cats get into it. So I just need to be better about when I'm tempted to buy more yarn, to just go and look at the yarn that I have on my shelf and get inspired by the yarn that I already have. Because I'll go through it and I want to keep it all because it's yarn that I'll use. I've gotten rid of a lot of yarn that I'm never going to use, but so most of the yarn, some of it I have just in case, like, well, maybe if I want to knit something for my sisters or for a child, like a baby that I just want some acrylic superwash yarn or something. I have a few skeins of that, but not much, hardly anything. It's all yarn that I will use and want to use. It's just a matter of remembering that I have it to use it. So yeah, so that goal has changed. I just need to just put something up on my desk to keep tally marks for how many projects I've knit from stash and then when I bought the yarn. So, but I think I'm doing fairly well on that one. And then my next goal was to knit a skirt. I can't remember the name of the pattern right off the top of my head, but Ann Budd designed a knitting pattern for Quince & Co. using Lark to knit a skirt. And ever since it came out, don't even remember how long ago, I've wanted to make it. And I have the yarn ready to knit it. I have enough yarn in a color that I like, but I really want to get my sweater done first, because if I put this cabled sweater down and start another big project, I'm afraid I'm not going to come back to it, because I love working on it, but I'm afraid it's going to get lost and buried. So I really want to finish that. That's why I've been putting the push on to finish my sweater too, is that I want to knit this skirt, but I want to finish my sweater first. The next one was to take a spinning class. Support Fiber, which I live like 35 minutes away from, in Portland, Maine, offers spinning classes. It's like one class a week for 3 weeks. But the timing just hasn't worked because it's often on Saturdays, and be like, oh look, there's one in May. Oh wait, every Saturday in May is booked for me. And then when I was getting my show notes ready for today, I went on to look on the website, but the website wouldn't load to let me know when the next spinning class was. So hopefully she'll offer another one this fall that I will be able to jump on, because I really do want to learn how to spin. And then my final goal was to knit a colorwork sweater. Now I did, depending on how the rest of my knitting goes this year, I did knit a sweater this year that had a colorwork yoke. It wasn't much. It was like just right here. It wasn't like across the shoulders or anything. So if I get to the end of the year and I have not knit another colorwork sweater, I'm going to count that, I think. But I do want to knit a sweater with more colorwork on it. I do want to knit an all-over colorwork sweater eventually. I feel like my cabled sweater was my big, massive sweater project this year. Maybe next year I'll do an all-over colorwork. But I have been looking at the Telja sweater by Jen Steingrass. I purchased the by hand serial their issue on Portland, Maine. I mean, I live 30 minutes from Portland. I just had to. And so and the Telgla pattern is in there. I'm not sure if it's available outside of that. I think so, but I'm not sure. I'll let you know. And that has a colorwork yoke, and there's colorwork on the hem of the sweater. I don't remember if there's any on the cuffs of the sleeves. I'll put a picture up so you can see it. So I've been looking at yarn, looked at some yarn today, trying to decide. I'm basically down to, I either want to use Quince & Co. Lark or try using Plotulopi, which if you don't know what that is, I don't know much about it, but it is Icelandic yarn. It's unspun. It comes, and they call it like a plate. It's like a flat plate, and the yarn is just all wound up. So it's unspun, but because of the long fiber length, or the long staple length of the fibers, I think that's the terminology. Again, I'm not a spinner. Because of the long length of the fibers, it knits up into a very strong, like garment or knitted item. And it's very easy, like it can break, but it's super easy to splice it back together. So Claire from the Woolly Thistle sells Plotulopi. So I just might have to get myself some. I looked on the Ravelry D-Stash pages, and I did message one person about it just to see, because she didn't have the price right on it. And the nice part about doing a sweater with some color work is that instead of like a normal pattern where you would need, over 1,000 yards, maybe like 1,400 yards of yarn in one color, that's really hard to find on Ravelry D-Stash pages. But whereas in this case, I would need 3 skeins of Plotulopi for the main color, and then 1 in each of the contrasting colors. So it's easier to piece it together, like from the Woolly Thistle and then from D-Stash pages, just to make it a little cheaper, because you can often find the yarn being sold for like less on Ravelry D-Stash pages than it is if you like buy it directly from a retailer, just because people are trying to get rid of it and make some money off on it instead of having it sit in their stash and never use it. So yeah, so that's where I'm at with that knitting goal. So overall, I have for sure done organize my yarn, working on stonecutter. That'll be done. That's 2. If I don't knit another colorwork sweater, I'm counting my other one, so that's 3. So, and then the knitting 3 projects from Stash is just sort of an ongoing. I haven't kept track all year, so I'm not necessarily going to be able to check that one off or not, but I'm doing pretty well in that one. So yeah, that is my update, a little over halfway through the year, on my 2017 knitting goals. So yeah, that is all that I have. The light is quickly fading. I always forget. Today is August 1st, and the sun is definitely coming up later and going down earlier than it was a month ago, which is kind of sad. The sun's not up when I wake up in the morning anymore. I miss it. So yeah, that's all I have for you today. Feel free to let me know if you had any knitting related goals that you had set for yourself this year, and if so, how you're doing on them, or if you'll consider setting some even for the rest of the year or for next year. So yeah, that's all for now, and until I see you next time, I hope that you enjoy creating and that you're learning from your mistakes. Bye!